When we sit down and examine a truly masterful cinematic battle, it is incredibly easy to just get completely swept away by the sheer, overwhelming scale of the action. You've got the colliding war horses, the swinging swords, that raw kinetic energy, the mud, the blood, the whole shebang. But today, I want us to look so much deeper than that. I want to deconstruct this confrontation not simply as a physical clash of two massive armies, but as a brutal, agonizing psychological contest. Because here's the thing, every single movement, every tiny hesitation, and every emotional wound in this sequence was weaponized. Literally weaponized. I'm going to break down exactly how human psychology shaped every single tactical decision out there, and how the battlefield itself was manipulated into a mechanism of pure, unfiltered mental torture, long before a single drop of blood was even spilled. We are going to dive deep into the framing, the pacing, and the absolutely incredible misdirection that makes this an absolute masterpiece of cinematic tension. Let's get into it. What strikes me first is actually not the noise, it's the silence. That eerie, incredibly heavy quiet is what brilliantly establishes this deeply unsettling mood right out of the gate. Picture it. A strange, almost suffocating stillness hangs over this vast gray field as two massive opposing forces just stand there, facing one another. You have thousands upon thousands of soldiers waiting, tightly gripping their shields and their spears, their breath just fogging up in the freezing cold air, and yet absolutely nobody is moving. It literally feels as though the land itself is holding its breath. And on one side, we have a commander who is completely fueled by loyalty, raw grief, and this crushing, overwhelming sense of personal responsibility. Then, on the exact opposite side, we have a ruler who understands cruelty so intimately, so deeply, that he's actually figured out how to transform human suffering into a mathematically precise military strategy. So, this brings us to a fundamental question. How does a battle begin before a single sword is even raised? Let me explain this, because it is the absolute key to understanding the entire conflict. The true confrontation here starts entirely inside the minds of the men leading it. This isn't just a basic numbers game question of who has the bigger army or the sharper weapons. No, it is a highly dangerous, incredibly high-stakes game of patience, manipulation, fear, and honestly, the staggering cost of human love. Especially when a psychopathic enemy knows exactly how to exploit that love without a single shred of mercy. The war has already begun in their heads, playing out as a tense psychological thriller, long before the physical violence actually erupts. All right, let's dive into Section 1, a spectacle of calculated cruelty. As we look really closely at these opening moments, I want you to understand that the battlefield has been meticulously set up as a theatrical stage. The villain here isn't just ordering an immediate military charge, which, would be standard tactical procedure. Instead, he is orchestrating this heartbreaking, deeply cruel performance meant for an audience of exactly one person. His masterstroke here is pure psychological warfare, destroying an opponent emotionally so that the physical battle becomes completely effortless. Rather than fighting a disciplined, well-positioned army, he wants to fight a broken, enraged mob. So what does he do? He releases a young, innocent captive, the brother of the opposing commander, and sends him running desperately across this vast, empty field. For a brief, agonizing second, he projects an illusion of hope. He makes everyone watching think that maybe, just maybe, mercy has entered the field. But he does this specifically so he can systematically and publicly rip that hope away, totally shattering his opponent's mental fortitude right in front of thousands of watching men. It is chilling. There is an exact methodical mechanics to this psychological torture. First, offer the illusion of hope. Second, force the opponent to watch. And third, wait for logic to break. I really want to emphasize that the true target of this public execution is not the boy running across the field. Not at all. The real target is the mind and the heart of the opposing commander. As the arrows begin falling from the sky, one missing, then another following, thudding violently into the dirt, the tension grows completely unbearable. The camera just lingers on the faces of the soldiers. Every single person understands exactly what is happening, yet absolutely nobody can stop it. The villain is literally forcing his opponent to watch every agonizing second unfold, just patiently waiting for the heroic commander's strategic, disciplined mindset to entirely collapse under the crushing weight of his own grief. And then, the trap succeeds flawlessly. Grief becomes rage, and rage becomes action. The very moment the final arrow finds its mark, something profound snaps within the hero. His military logic completely disappears beneath a tidal wave of uncontrollable emotion. The commander, who was supposed to remain patient, who was supposed to hold his defensive lines and utilize his tactical high ground, suddenly spurs his horse and rides forward, entirely alone. It is a desperate, reckless decision born from immense love and unbearable pain, totally devoid of any military logic whatsoever. Yet as I break this down, I realize it is deeply, heartbreakingly human. I mean, think about it. Who among us would calmly calculate military odds after being forced to witness such a personalized, devastating horror? This brings us to what I consider one of the most terrifying yet incredibly inspiring images ever put to screen: the ultimate sword of defiance. The lone rider advances, and the camera of our imagination almost freezes. Ahead of him lies an absolute ocean of heavy cavalry, drawing their weapons, preparing to thunder across the field directly at him. He knows the odds are mathematically impossible. Survival is no longer an option here. Yet instead of fleeing, he dismounts, stands his ground, and slowly, deliberately draws his sword against a massive, charging wall of horses. Framed against that sheer terror, drawing his sword is a profound refusal to surrender his identity. It's a moment where ultimate courage and pure desperation become completely indistinguishable from each other. The kinetic energy of the impending charge is immense, yet he anchors the entire moment with sheer, undeniable willpower. Which brings us right into Section 2, Chaos and Raw Survival. In an instant, the explosive collision finally happens, and all those careful plans just dissolve beneath the chaotic violence. That eerie, suffocating silence we discussed at the very beginning, that is erased forever. Steel violently meets steel. Massive war horses crash into wooden shields, sending men flying through the air. The hero's own reinforcements crash into the enemy cavalry just milliseconds before impact, and the open field is instantly plunged into a level of chaotic, deafening violence that is almost unimaginable. I really want to point out how terrifyingly authentic this confusion feels. Real warfare rarely unfolds according to the elegant maps and perfect, neat diagrams generals draw up in their tents. Almost instantly, those diagrams vanish into an absolute nightmare of mud, blood, and screaming. Soldiers completely lose sight of their commanders. Intricate formations shatter into isolated, desperate brawls. Men are fighting furiously not because they understand the grand strategic picture, but simply because the terrifying, adrenaline-fueled enemy directly in front of their face leaves them absolutely no alternative but to swing their weapon. Notice how the physical landscape itself evolves, transforming into a terrifying weapon all on its own. It starts out as this open, expansive field, offering plenty of room for movement, flanking, and retreat. But as the fighting grinds on, we see accumulating casualties piling up. Slowly, the visceral reality of warfare sets in. Those mounds of corpses, dead horses, and discarded weapons literally turn into impassable physical barriers. The environment physically transforms into a grim, horrifying monument that traps the living. The soldiers are no longer just fighting the opposing army. They are fighting the physical consequences of the violence that just occurred. Their freedom of movement completely vanishes as the camera brings us lower and lower into the claustrophobic, blood-soaked muck of the battlefield. Let's move to Section 3, the claustrophobic shield wall trap. This is where we see high-level strategy and sheer, visceral horror merge perfectly together. Movement becomes incredibly limited. I want to shift the pacing of our breakdown right here to really convey the crushing, agonizing weight of this trap. Little by little, the enemy's unengaged forces begin shaping the battlefield according to a larger, incredibly sinister design. A slowly forming cage of locked, towering shields and long extended spears begins to encircle the exhausted, disorganized allied army. The sheer genius here is that the trap doesn't snap shut instantly. It forms so gradually that the men fighting blindly in the center don't even realize they are being systematically caged until it is entirely too late. The confinement suddenly becomes a far greater enemy than the actual swords of the opponent. Every single retreating step the trapped soldiers take narrows their available space even further. They are being physically compressed, herded like livestock into a suffocating killing floor. And naturally, as the physical space shrinks, panic spreads like a virus. The psychological impact here is devastating to witness because human beings are simply not biologically designed to remain calm while trapped inside a rapidly collapsing enclosure. The soldiers realize they are caught with absolutely nowhere to run. They are literally trapped between a slowly advancing, synchronized wall of impenetrable spears on one side and the crushing, thrashing bodies of their own desperate, terrified allies on the other. The framing titans, absolutely refusing to let us escape the claustrophobia. You can feel the sheer terror and the infectious realization washing over the men as the trap tightens inch by bloody inch. The situation deteriorates until the most basic human necessity, just getting a breath of air, becomes precious. This leads to an agonizing, drowning-like sequence that is honestly incredibly hard to process. Our hero commander is pushed downward, literally trampled beneath heavy layers of suffocating mud and panicking, screaming bodies. Men are colliding from every single direction. Dead weight just accumulates on top of him. He is struggling upward, desperately searching for a single breath of oxygen in a literal ocean of thrashing people. The sound design muffles, perfectly mimicking the terrifying sensation of being submerged underwater. It highlights the ultimate vulnerability of our physical limits. Listen, it doesn't matter how unbelievably brave or skilled you are, courage cannot eliminate your lungs' physical need for air, and we are left gasping right alongside him. Now for Section 4, the unexpected arrival of hope. Just as all seems entirely hopelessly lost, I want to shift our focus to the distant horizon. A faint rising of dust appears. The vital question hangs over the entire battlefield. Can the Allied cavalry arrive in time? The narrative has dragged us so far down into absolute suffocating despair that this tiny visual shift, this distant sign of change, feels absolutely massive. It starts as a vague blur in the background and gradually transforms into a very tangible physical threat to the villain's extreme arrogance. Let's build on that unbearable tension for a second. The trapped army is balancing right on the absolute razor's edge of total destruction. The men are suffocating, the spears are closing in, everything depends on this singular moment. We cut back and forth between the dying men and the charging horses, keeping us holding our breath until the very last possible millisecond. As the cavalry strikes, we realize a profound truth. No strategy remains invincible forever. The reinforcements violently hit the rear flank of the shield wall, and the extraordinary emotional release that follows is just palpable. The encirclement that seemed completely unbreakable suddenly fractures and buckles beneath this massive, fresh kinetic momentum. It proves a fundamental truth of warfare and psychology. Even the most brilliant, obsessively controlling, cruel plans possess fatal vulnerabilities. You simply cannot control every single variable in a chaotic world, especially not when genuine human determination and the raw power of a desperate rescue collide with rigid formation. Finally, Section 5, the true cost of victory. We are now observing a massive, dramatic reversal of momentum. The hunters literally become the hunted. I find this thematic shift incredibly satisfying to break down. Throughout the entire beginning of the battle, the villain relied on safe distance, high ground, and highly calculated emotional manipulation. He treated human lives like disposable pawns on a chessboard. But now, the psychological balance of the entire battlefield has shifted in an instant. All of those advantages are completely falling apart. His extreme, smug confidence rapidly turns to desperate anxiety as he is forced to turn and flee. The chaotic, violent forces that he so callously engineered and unleashed upon his enemy have now turned around and returned to consume him personally. When the dust finally begins to settle, we see a permanently changed commander. Reflecting on our surviving hero, the man we see standing at the end, covered in thick mud, blood, and sheer exhaustion, is fundamentally different from the man who recklessly charged across the field hours earlier. Notice his physical acting and posture here. He has gained a hard-earned, brutal understanding of the devastating consequences of impulsive, emotional decisions. He physically carries the immense, crushing weight of leadership now. You can almost see in his eyes that he is tallying the countless lives lost, fully realizing that so much of this carnage happened because he allowed his personal grief to override his strategic patience. Ultimately, psychology shaped strategy, and strategy shaped destiny. I really want to reiterate that every physical act we just deconstructed in this breakdown, the cruel opening trap, the desperate lone charge, the suffocating shield wall, and the climactic explosive rescue, was merely the physical manifestation of internal human emotions. It was a visceral projection of fear, pride, immense love, and raw desperation playing out on a grand, bloody scale. The military tactics were simply the physical vehicle for the psychological warfare. This entire sequence proves a vital human truth. Human beings possess a remarkable ability to endure when protecting something meaningful. The enemy commander's fatal flaw was arrogantly believing that pure, unemotional calculation and enough cruel pressure could break any human spirit. He fundamentally misunderstood human determination, and he was entirely wrong. Human persistence, the absolute refusal to surrender, and the primal drive to protect what we love will always outlast and overpower pure, cold, unfeeling calculation. That right there is the true heart of this cinematic masterpiece. So I want to leave you with a lingering, provocative thought to really reflect on the immense psychological weight we just deconstructed together today. Think about it. Think about the arrows falling from the sky, the wall of charging heavy horses, the suffocating, claustrophobic crush of the shield wall, and that desperate gasp for a single breath of air in the mud. Put yourself in those boots for a second. Under that unbearable physical and emotional pressure, how would you have reacted?